All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this. Well, currently, if you're watching it in real time, this is the live stream. If you are not watching this in real time, then welcome to this probably going to be multi-part series where I dive into exactly how to, well, like the title says, design and implement a brand new feature into an existing, slightly older code base. So the goal here is going to be to understand. First, you need to understand sort of the business logic, is what it's called. Sort of the way the system behaves and the way the system rather should behave. And what purpose it really serves, and then we need to understand what this new feature is and its purpose and what it serves, and then we can, once we understand all those moving parts, then we can start to dive into modifying some code. So let me flip over to, or let me rather run this application. So I can right click on it and say run as Spring Boot application, which should just launch it into existence. If all goes well, anyway. Oh, right, it won't go well because I need to tunnel into. Hold on one second. Java tunnel. And then I also need to modify one thing. Let me just bring this off screen for one moment. So I'm just sort of getting my code base up and running here. I just have some slightly sensitive information, not the end of the world if it's shown, but slightly sensitive information that I need to hide off screen before I can get this application up and running. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. Give me 1 second. So, what we want to do here is get up and running. Oops, not this view. I want to grab, where's my IDE? Here we go. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so I want to fire up my server here, run my code, and we'll go through sort of what the functionality is that we are looking to improve upon, and what essentially how to go about doing it, right? So again, I'm starting from scratch here. It's been a while since I've looked at this code. This is the code where I'm currently going to be diving into. I haven't looked at it in a long time, so I'm going to be stumbling, I'm going to be fumbling, and that is the point of this talk or these live streams. Is you're seeing completely unfiltered and raw what it's like for someone with 13 plus years of real world experience as a coder, what it's like to go through this process. It's not going to be pretty. I can tell you that up front. Greetings from India. Nice to have you on board. What time is it in India right now? It's 1 p.m. Eastern time right now, so I'm assuming India is, it's at least, 14 hours ahead? It's got to be like 3 o'clock in the morning there. Okay, so here's the application. If you're not already familiar, I've done a few of these already. You might be familiar with what this application is, but I will give you the background again for some of you who might be new to watching these live streams. The concept here is a courseware application. Basically, this is kind of like a Udemy platform, if you will. This is a platform that allows teachers to come and create courses and sell courses to students. Students can come buy the courses and then take the courses and go through and consume the content, watch the videos, leave comments, interact with the community, that kind of thing. So that's the long and short of what this is. There's a lot more moving parts to it, but that's more or less what this platform, I call it Professo, what the Professo platform does. Hey, Big Leo. I don't think Big Leo, in terms of that username, whatever, I'm assuming your name is Leo, hasn't missed a single live stream yet. So, well, thanks for joining yet again. So, yeah, it's a courseware application, and what happens is, this is where I need to explain to you some of the existing logic and then therefore the logic that we're going to enhance. Let's say I go in and I'm interested in the, Java super course, for instance, and I want to go into this course as a student and I want to buy the course, right? I see the course, I see what's inside of it, all the different modules and some of the reviews, and I read through and I say, okay, this sounds like a cool course. I'd like to buy it. They click the button, they type in their credit card information, they say purchase. Okay, what happens? Well, then it goes and it's something called fulfillment. So Oh, 22:41. So that means it's like 10:41. So that's not as late. I thought you guys in India were like more than 12 hours ahead. Anyway, so when they get the course, it has to be fulfilled. So my code needs to deliver what it is that the student purchased to them, and which is normal. That's fine. Whatever. There's nothing special about that. And then the student can click and log in to take the course. So they click, log in. You type in whatever your username and password is, and then you get presented with courses that you can now take. So for example, like the Mars Rover course, so they can click on the Mars Rover course. Let's say that's what they purchased for whatever, $40 or something. They can click on the Mars Rover course, and they can go through and start taking all of the lessons. So this one has a whole bunch of lessons in it. They can click, watch a lesson, and then mark it as complete and go to the next lesson, that kind of thing, right? So they completed the, what is an API lesson? They go to the next one. Again, nothing groundbreaking here, nothing crazy is going on. Here's the curveball. So here, now that you have a background on exactly what the current functionality is, in other words, just like a Udemy, you can log in, take the course, whatever. The curveball is I'm coming out with a new type of offering, a new type of course offering that is going to be something called evergreened. Evergreen is a terminology that is used, at least in the world that I'm in. That means it can be used today, tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. The experience that the student will be presented with will be the same whether they sign up today or 5 years from now. The curveball here is the modules, when the lessons get delivered to that person, they need to be evergreened in such a way that they are delivered based on when they started. So if the student starts today, they should get access to the first module for the next 7 days or whatever. So it unlocks the first module, which is 7 days worth of lessons. The next week, it unlocks new lessons. So really that's it. That's just a matter of unlocking lessons based on a start date. Okay, but it's evergreened because if you start today, you're going to get access to the first 7 lessons. But if your brother had started 4 weeks ago, your brother will have access to 4 weeks of lessons, not just 1 week of lessons like you have. Okay, so the functionality of unlocking courses based on a dynamic start date is what in the industry is referred to as evergreen, more or less. So that's the trick here. That's what we need to infuse into this platform now. I don't know if Udemy does that, but this is something that will, it just provides pacing. It helps to provide a little bit of accountability to students. Because one problem that a lot of course creators have is the students fall off. They start strong and they start and do all the lessons up to a certain point, and then they stop. And that is something that me as a teacher, I want to try to solve that as best I can. I want to try to produce something that will help my students to stay accountable, to finish the course. That's all I want. I don't just want someone to buy my courses and then never take a single lesson. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help them. I want the student to go through the course, complete the course, and then be able to apply what they learned to the real world and have this great success story, right? That's where the true differentiator is in the real world, is being able to get a student through the entire course. So this kind of, evergreening the content and having it have a nice pacing, it provides a little bit of that accountability, and they can sort of see, oh no, I'm behind, or I'm way ahead. I've got all the lessons, in the can and done. It just gives you a sense of accomplishment when you've got all the lessons completed, and there's nothing more that you can do or should do until the next lessons come out. So we need to build that into this platform. So step 1 is let's understand the background of the problem. That's what I just explained to you. Step 2 is, now that we understand the concept of evergreening and releasing lessons based on a start date, now we need to look at the code and figure out and think. We don't need to put code, start typing code out right now, but we need to think, how are we going to solve this problem? Okay, what is the design going to be? What new database modifications am I going to have to make, if any? What aspects of the code am I going to have to change? What are some potential design patterns that can be applied to the new code? Is there any refactoring of the code that needs to happen? Who knows, right? These are all things that we need to sort of poke around the code base to find out the answers to. Hello, Barty? I don't know. I'm bad with names. I said that from the beginning. So, okay, let's look at the code. So first things first is we need to figure out how are these lessons essentially, because it all comes down to delivering the lessons to a student. So above and beyond just when someone signs up for a course, how are these lessons made available to a student? So where's the code that actually makes this stuff available to the student? The first place I wanted to look, and this is probably not where the code matters, this is not probably where we're going to be changing the code, but the first sort of screen, if you will, is in the My Courses tab, which gives you all the courses that you are signed up for, which in this case, I'm looking for the URL. For those of you on a mobile phone watching this, again, I always say this, I harp on you guys if you're watching on a mobile phone. The font is small, so I'd recommend watching on a bigger screen, like a desktop, or just a bigger computer monitor, laptop, tablet, just not a mobile phone, guys, because you're gonna struggle to see some of the text. Could you please provide the links? Someone says. I don't know what links you're talking about. There are no links for me to provide to you yet, so I cannot provide you a link. Okay, so this is the URL structure: /students/courses. Okay, so where is this in the code base? That's what we need to find out. So when we're talking about Java code, there is a concept of model view controller, MVC. Controllers are sort of your entry point into your code. So when your web application is running, when you have a Java web application running, more or less the starting point when anything really happens, when anything is triggered in terms of any sort of flow of code, typically starts in the controllers. The controllers are what listen, I always say this, controllers listen to HTTP requests. In other words, it listens to when we type in a URL and then hit the enter key and say go, the first thing that happens in the flow of code is the controllers are notified that something should happen. So that's where I go first. I look for a controller that is referring to this code, or this path, /students/courses. So let's take a look. I typically store all of my controllers in one Java package. All a Java package is just a folder. That's all it is. So I have one folder here that has all of my controllers. Okay, not entirely the best approach when you're getting to the point of having 10 plus controllers. Sometimes it's better to break it down into even smaller packages. But anyway, these are the controllers that make up this entire application. So there's a controller in here that hits this endpoint /students/courses. Where is it? There's a few ways to find it. You could literally go through every single one of the controllers to look for it. Another way to look is to search for exactly what you're looking for, /students/courses. You never know, you might find it. So you go search, file, paste. So I'm pasting in /students/courses. Let's see if we can find that somewhere in our logic. And there it is. I say there it is, but there's actually, this is the wrong spot. This is in the security package. I'm not looking in the security package, I'm looking in the web package. So we have some return redirects here. So this is not, I'm looking for specifically a request mapping or a get mapping annotation. So none of these fit the bill in terms of what exactly it is that I'm looking for. So that's fine. I mean, we can start searching that way, but I wasn't anticipating a success. So the next thing I do is you can go one of two ways. You can take the right-hand side and search for just the right-hand side, or you can take the left-hand side and search for just the left-hand side. I'm going to search for just the left-hand side. You can really do this either way, but I'm going to search for just /students. So this might give me a hit on a controller. I'm going to expand all these search results and just look at the web package. This is going to give me a hit on just the slash students. And I see here, student course controller has a request mapping of slash students. So if I double click on this guy, we can see that this entire controller has the request mapping of slash students appended to it. So that means that for this particular controller, any URL that starts with slash students will be directed into this particular controller. Okay, so cool. That's the start point. But now we need to see slash students slash courses. So is there another one in here that has slash courses? And that's why I said you go look for slash courses alone or slash students or whatever. And here it is, courses. So that means that if you go to slash students slash courses, because this is a GET request, that's what happens when you go to the web and type something in and hit enter. That's called a GET request. It's going to go here, most likely. So let me put a breakpoint inside of this controller just to see that we are in this particular block of code, and that's where we are actually going. So I'll put a breakpoint by double-clicking here and adding a little blue dot, and I'm going to start it in debug mode by clicking the down arrow and hitting my Professor core as the name of my little runtime environment, if you will. So it's going to boot up in debug mode, and then I can go back to this page and hit enter and see if we hit that breakpoint. And sure enough, there we go. It just hit that breakpoint. Now we're in here. We've got our green bar across, so we know this is the right spot to be. Okay, so let me just hit play. Now that I know that this is the starting point, we can take a look at how it displays these courses, right? Because I can click on any of these courses and I can get into them and start watching them. So we can see how that logic works. Let me go back to this other view. Gives me a little bit of a bigger screen. So we do a redirect to login page. I think this is if you're not logged in. If you're not logged in, it'll just redirect you. Yeah, if user is null, then it'll redirect you back. So if for whatever reason you timed out and you try to visit this page, it'll just redirect you to the login page. That's not helpful. We're grabbing, here we're doing a user repository find one, which just, hey, gets your user account from the database because you're logged in, so we want to fetch that. If user .get name is empty. Oh, this is a separate, yeah. This is something not important. Let's see. Here we go. Purchased courses, right? So there's some logic around delinquency. So delinquency is another feature inside of Professor that if you are delinquent on your payments or whatever, you get cut off from the courses. That's sort of how it works. If you're subscribed to a monthly course and you haven't paid your bill, then you lose access to your course. That's sort of how that logic works. But then if you are not delinquent, then it looks for all the courses that you have purchased. That's basically what it does here, is it goes through all the order information that is tied to your user account. So user.getOrders. So basically, what have you purchased? Go through everything that you've purchased. And for every one that you are not delinquent, add it to a set of courses that you should essentially have unlocked. Okay? And it goes through and gets the courses and blah, blah, blah. So that's just it. The courses that you purchased that you are not delinquent on, we put it in here. Now, why are we doing it again? What is this? Get order stream for each order not delinquent. Oh, is delinquent. I see. That's kind of not efficient. I should have done this. Why am I streaming again? Anyway, whatever. I'm not here to fix this old code. I'm here to add, hopefully, new, better code to it. So I guess it's adding delinquent courses, so they display differently. So for the ones that you purchased, they get put on the model. For the ones that you are delinquent, it also gets put on the model. And then I have a feature called suggested offers, which is, hey, if you've purchased this course, you might also like that course. Fair enough. Again, we're looking to add functionality in terms of evergreening and having lessons be unlocked as we are based on a start date. So all of this is great. That just shows us what courses are on the screen. I just wanted to scan through there just to get a cursory understanding of the code again, because I haven't looked at it in a while. So that's basically how I would do it, right? This is how I get to, in the flow of actions here, how do I get to ultimately the screen that I want to have behave differently, right? The screen that behaves differently is when we click on a course. But before we can click on a course, we need to see the courses that we belong to. So that was the first step. Fair enough. I learned a little bit there. I remembered, hey, there's some about delinquency and some that aren't delinquent. I don't know if I have any delinquent courses. No, I don't. I could make myself delinquent on a course to show you what that looks like, but who cares? That's not important right now. What's important then is when I click on a course like this, it will go into the course and show me the lessons. The thing is, it's going to show me all the lessons, right? And this is where I want it to behave differently. I don't want it to show me all the lessons. I only want it to show me lessons that are unlocked based on my start date, which does not, that functionality doesn't exist yet, but we're going to get there hopefully soon. It's not going to be soon. I shouldn't mislead you guys. This is going to take a while to do all this code. So this might be split up into multiple streams, live streams. So when I clicked on a course, you see this funky URL structure takes place. But there's method to this madness. Remember, we were in student courses before, right? If I go back, we were in /students/courses. Let's let it refresh. Oh, it's in my breakpoint. I was like, why is it taking so long? It hit my breakpoint. Let me let it play through. Let me remove my breakpoint because we know we're in this. This is the controller that we're in. So yeah, when we are looking at all the courses that we own, that we purchased, it's this URL structure /student/courses. But when we click on a course, it changes from /students/courses to a more specific URL, which is /courses/ a number /sections a number, and then lessons, and then a number. So I know what this means, but for you guys, you might not know what this means. This structure represents a course entity followed by the course ID. So each course that you can offer, that you can purchase, has an identifier that uniquely identifies that course. That is this course 229. So course 229 represents, the Mars rover course that I have. Courses are made up of sections. Okay, courses have many sections. So there's some relationship mapping going on here. A one-to-many. One course has many sections. Okay, this is very relevant to the enhancement that we want to make here, because I want to be able to potentially unlock not just lessons based on a start date, but maybe I want to unlock sections based on a start date. Okay, so you see how my mind is sort of thinking about this? I should go a little bit further to explain the relationship between sections and lessons. There are, for any one section, there are many lessons. It's a bad example. The Mars rover course only has one section. There's only one section, and all the lessons belong to that one section, so it's a bad example. If I found another course, like let's say my, I don't know, do I have the Java super course? Time leaf. How about JavaScript? The JavaScript super course likely has multiple, yeah. So each one of these headers, if you will, is a different section. Section, lessons. Section, lessons. Section, lessons. Okay? So one course has many sections, and any one section has many lessons. Okay, so there's a multiple one-to-many relationship going on here. And that's why we see this play out in the URL. Course ID, section ID, lesson ID. So if I'm looking at the HTML tags lesson, for instance, that lesson ID is 12, which belongs to section ID 4, which belongs to course ID 2. Anyway, just wanted to really hammer that home as to what that URL structure is all about. That's not an uncommon URL structure. So that's why I wanted to make sure to describe it to you. So based on this, let's take a look at the controller logic. Because again, everything sort of starts with a controller. A request happens, which is, I type in this URL. I didn't actually type it in, but let's pretend I typed it in and hit enter. When I hit enter, that does a get request, which hits a controller that is listening for this particular endpoint. So this particular endpoint is students, courses, course ID, sections, section ID, lessons, lesson ID. So let's see if we can find any of that inside of our student course controller, because that starts with students. So look for students, courses. Well, there's students, courses, but then we want students, courses, course ID. Let's keep scrolling down. Okay, here's students, courses, course ID. Cool. But we still need to also tack on section ID and lesson ID. So let's keep going. Do we have any more? Request mapping. Oh dear, look at all these. But this one's only a post. I don't want a post yet. I want a get request. Let's keep going until we see another method. Okay, here's a request mapping that is a get. So this has section ID, lessons, lesson ID, but then retake test. So that's too far. I've gone too far. That's too specific, or even more specific. I want to go less specific. I just want to get to this as a what you call it, a path, an endpoint. Let's keep scrolling and see if we can find it. Request mapping. Nope, that one's still too specific. Keep going. Oh, this might be it. Yes. Okay. Students, courses, course ID. Oh no, this is lessons, lesson ID. This is the one when it's used as a bug fix when getting emails. Okay, so this is sort of a view lesson 2. Gotcha. Okay, so there's probably a method called view lesson, and this is sort of a shortcut for it. So let's keep going down and seeing if we can find one. Here's view lesson. I anticipate this being, yes, here we go. So here we go. Let's put a breakpoint in here, 448, and let's just see if this breakpoint hits when I refresh this page. Sure enough, it did. So we go in here. So here's where the magic happens, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the code goes in, and we actually get the course and essentially display all the lessons on screen. So what happens? We check and see if the user is null. This happens, I remember this. This is, some courses are free. If a course is free, it does not require you to log in, and you can just watch the course. So I think that's what's going on here. It just gives you the ability to view the course as a free user. I'm trying to think, how does that apply to this logic of evergreening? That's true. Now that the implication is, does this evergreening work if you are a free user? I don't think it can work if you're a free user, because we need to determine when you signed up for the course. And if you're a free user, there is no sign up. You don't have to sign up. So that's something that we should take note of. So you should have somewhere that you're keeping notes. I'll just put it in like a notepad or something. So, you know, notes for, you know, Professo, you know, evergreen enhancement. I'll just put a hyphen. Evergreen concept shouldn't be available for free users / free courses. Well, I shouldn't say free courses. You can have a free course that you still have to sign up for, in which case that should still work, but it's more free lessons, right? Because free lessons don't require you to log in. So that might be a bit of a curveball. So this is the whole point of thinking about this and figuring out the ins and outs of the code and what considerations should be made when we are designing a solution. Okay, so the first curveball is a free user. I know that for the free users, you don't, or rather for the free lessons, you don't have to log in to view them. So, and since evergreening is based off of when you signed up, at least I think it should be based on when you signed up for that course, or when you ordered that course rather, it's going to be a problem because there is no ordering a course. So yeah, if it's based on ordering a course and you don't order it, what are you going to do? Validate purchased course. This is just a security thing to make sure that you did indeed purchase this course. So if you try to access it directly through, like if you try to type in a URL to a course that you haven't purchased yet, it should throw an exception. So if you haven't, yeah, and if you didn't purchase the course, but it's a free course, don't worry about it. You know, you can go and view it. That's fine. But if you haven't viewed it, then it should be an exception should be thrown. Okay, then we go down and say, hey, grab a user. And then this is a check to see if the lesson that we're looking at is a quiz. Okay, So for this one, I think we're okay. We don't need to worry about quizzes right now. Quizzes could be quizzes are just a lesson. So to give you an idea of the layout, so there's a course can have many. So this is a one-to-many relationship sections, and a section can have a one-to-many relationship with with lessons, right? One and star means many. I guess I can just type in many, and I can maybe wrap this in brackets. So course is one-to-many to sections. A section has one-to-many to lessons, but then a lesson is made up of. There's no relationship here. It's inheritance. A lesson can be a video lesson, a text lesson, or what I call a quiz lesson. So a lesson can be made up of 3 different subtypes of lessons. Okay, so the parent class, the parent lesson, has some generic properties that are generic to all 3 of these subtypes. But a video lesson, for example, has information related to a video, like a video URL or whatever. Text lessons, I think text lessons are just more or less a regular lesson. I don't think they have anything really different from a lesson. And then a quiz lesson is very different because a quiz is very different from a regular text lesson. It's an actual quiz. So that's just to give you some rundown on why I'm doing this. I'm saying, hey, if the lesson that we're trying to load, remember we're trying to load a lesson from right here. The lesson ID is being passed into the path, the path variable. If it's a quiz, then do something special. In other words, probably we're going to populate the model, the MVC model view controller. We're populating the model with quiz-related stuff. And then we can just populate the model regularly with lesson-related stuff. So here's what's interesting. Let's go into this populate model for lesson, and we can see exactly what's being populated. So what do we do here? Lesson progress map. So we're getting the progress for lessons. In other words, if you've completed a lesson before, it's going to keep track of that stuff. I don't think that matters at the moment. Yeah, I don't think that matters right now. We don't care about where we are in a course because, yeah, what matters is we want to potentially cut off and not display new lessons or lessons further out in the future if that's how it's set up. And then we can go in here and look at, okay, so it goes through the order for the users. So why is it doing this? Why is it going through all the orders? That's interesting. I wouldn't imagine if we had a specific lesson ID that belonged to a specific course, why would we be iterating through all the orders for that user? Let's have a look. If an order is delinquent, continue. Okay. We're looking at the offers that exist inside of an order. Okay, I should probably talk about this as well. So, how this thing is structured is there's something called an order. An order has a does it have a one-to-many relationship with offers? Is that true? Actually, no, I think it's a many-to-many. I think. Yes, I think it's a many-to-many relationship. So for whatever reason, I needed to create a many-to-many relationship here between an order and the offers. I can't remember why. Let me make sure that that's correct. Let me actually look at the order and see if there are many. Yeah, there's many offers inside it. So there's an order. There's the order class. There are many offers inside of it. If we look at a single offer, are there also many orders? Yes, there are. Set of orders. Now this is interesting. I would have expected there to be a new hash set defined right here. Why is there no new hash set? That's a potential for a bug right there, I think. I'm tempted to say new hash set here. Anyway. So yes, it's a many-to-many relationship. So order to offers is many-to-many. And then offer to course, I believe, is one-to-many. And I'll double check that. So an offer offer has many courses. And a course, does a course map back to one and only one offer? No, it's also a many to many. So order to offer is many to many. Offer to course is many to many. And then course to section, section to lesson. So you see there's a lot of levels here. It basically starts, I can put this above at the very top. It starts at the order level, which goes to the offers, and then offer goes to courses, and then courses, course goes to sections, and section goes to lessons, and lesson is split up into 3 different. So you see there's many, many, many levels of complexity here. So what was I just looking at? Where was the, here. So populate model for lesson. What this method is going to do is it's going to essentially populate all these lessons here for when you click on a course and click on, well, when you click on a course, you're going to go straight to a lesson. And that's what populates this left-hand side. All these lessons are populated onto the model, and then therefore they're clickable. You can click on them and check them out. But again, that's what we want to modify. We want to modify that such that we cut off access to some lessons depending on the schedule of when we should be releasing lessons based on this evergreening concept. Okay, so for all orders, get the offers, and for every offer, get the course that contains this course. So what is this course? Is this passed in? Okay, this is passed in. So really, we're just filtering. We're just filtering to get the course. And then based on the course, we are looking at the purchase URL. Okay. That might be useful for if you're in a free lesson or something and you want to be able to purchase, have a link to purchase. That's probably what that's for. Yeah, enable attachments. Yeah, right. So there's concepts of enabling attachments, comments, and downloads. In other words, should I be able to click right here, right click to download this lesson? This is additional functionality that you can unlock for an offer. So if you want to give the student the ability to download your lessons, you can do that. You can unlock that. If you want to give the student the ability to add a discussion, to have comments and stuff, you can unlock that as well. And then you can unlock the concept of attachments. So if the video has attachments, this one doesn't, but they would be able to click on the attachments in the top right-hand corner. So that's what that's all about. So we're just setting some properties and putting that onto the model, putting the current lesson onto the model, progress map, video provider, and then just the entire course. So the entire course is added to the model. So potentially there's some things that we could do here to modify how this works, but it looks like it just puts the entire course onto the model as well as the current lesson that they're trying to load up with some properties that, you know, some features that get unlocked for that particular course. So that might not be where we want to add this functionality. It looks like, well, I mean maybe, but this is, you know, this is the brainstorming phase. What's the best way to solve this problem? So what this does is this populate model for lesson thing. It populates the model right here, model.put. All model is just a hash map. Okay, if you know what a hash map is, it gets populated. And then we go to the students/student course view. So I'm thinking that maybe the majority of this functionality potentially is unlocked, or rather coded, is going to be coded on the view, which might make sense, right? If we want to cut the student off from being able to view certain lessons, it's probably mostly going to be driven from the view, right? If it's not visible on here on the view, they'd have to know the specific URL and try to manually type in that URL in order to see the next lesson. Okay, most students aren't going to do that, and even if they did, we could put some checks, some security checks in here, like we did right here, you know, to say, hey, you know, for this one, it's saying, hey, did you actually purchase the course that you're trying to view? Or we can do, hey, should you actually have access to this lesson? Like, check and see when it should be unlocked and make sure that you know, are within those dates. So it could just be a security check right here. In fact, I'm actually going to put that as a to-do. I'm going to create a to-do comment, and I'm going to say add security check to ensure the student is allowed to view this lesson. And I say this lesson because there's a lesson ID right here, right? Making sure the student is allowed to view this lesson with respect to the evergreen logic, business rules or something like that. So now I have a bit of a placeholder in my code for what I need to do next. And when you do it to do like this, it's nice because then it adds a little clipboard here. This little clipboard now you can get access to for tasks. So there's a way to view the tasks in the window, I think. Window, show view. Is it tasks? Yeah, tasks. Here we go. And you can put tasks like over here or something. So, at to do right here. Boom. You can double click it and see your tasks. And then this one, I have another to do here, which this is all commented out. But anyway, you get the idea of, it's a little helpful checklist of stuff that is built within the IDE. So some people might not know that you can do that, but you can build that into the comments, which is nice. Okay, so that's the first place. But I think the next place in terms of the student's view is in the students/student course. So for those of you who are not familiar, when you have a controller that is returning a string, okay, controller is up here. When you have an @controller, you have a class, a Java class annotated with @controller, and that controller has a method that returns a string, a request mapping method, or a get mapping, or a post mapping, or whatever, that returns a string. That means it's returning a view. Which means, what does returning a view mean? It means it's going to return an HTML view. It's going to return an HTML page. The HTML pages are stored inside of the source main resources templates folder. And then this is saying without having to type in source main resources templates, without having to prepend it here like source main resources templates, that would get really annoying to have to type in every time. So that's that complexity is abstracted away. We don't have to worry about that. We just worry about here. This means look at the students folder. So that assumes that there's a students folder. So let's take a look. Is there a students folder? Yes, there is. It's right here. Within students, there should be a student course.html. Let's see. Students, student course.html. Ta-da! So here's our HTML view. That is right here in front of us. That's what gets rendered right there is the HTML view. So this is the view that we are messing around with. So there's a whole bunch of JavaScript, which should be extracted out of here, but it's not. Do as I say, not as I do, ladies and gentlemen. It's better to pull this out into a separate JavaScript file. It just gets messy when you have all this JavaScript above your HTML code. Forgive me, I wrote this code half a decade ago or more when I was rushing, and yeah. Excuse. So here we have where we are. Where are we? I want to look at how the lesson. So Sidebar Lessons sounds promising. So basically, I want to get to this the clickable blue links here, right? So how do I get access to these guys? One trick is you right click in the area that you want to check out. You can right click in your browser and say inspect, and that's going to pull up at the bottom. Let me kind of zoom in here a little bit. There you go. Zoom in for those of you who are crazy and on your cell phones. And I say that with nothing but love. We can see exactly where this code is. So as you can see, when I hover over different lines of code above here, you can see a whole bunch of stuff is being highlighted. So if I hover over the div class equals blah, blah, blah with sidebar lessons, that I clicked on now encapsulates exactly what it is that I want to modify. I want to modify this view. I want to change the output here. I want to reduce the number of lessons that a student can see based on some other stuff that we haven't yet talked about in terms of the evergreening logic, and there, a teacher needs to decide what the evergreen schedule should be for a particular course. How should it be dripped out? week by week. Those are all things we haven't talked about yet, but let's assume that functionality exists. This is where we might put that into play. So the sidebar lessons. So what happens? How do we build this out? If section has at least one live lesson equals true, then it's going to render this div. Okay, cool. Within here, we're going to say sections. So we're doing a for each loop through each of this course's sections, assigning it to a variable called section, and iterating through. So in here, this is where we are iterating through each one of those sections. For each section, we're going to grab the name of the section and output it to this div. In other words, that's this code right here. Okay, Introduction to JavaScript is the name of the section. JavaScript Basics is the next name of the next section. HTML Basics is the next name of the next section, etc., etc. For each section, output the name of the section. That's what this is doing here. Then we are doing the thwidth is we're defining a variable here, but then we're saying for each lesson in the section do something, and we're iterating through and outputting, probably whether or not it's been completed and blah blah blah. So this is all the minute details that go along with each of the lessons. But basically, this is where we want to modify stuff, right? So if the section is where we are introducing the functionality of unlocking based on a certain start date, then we would need to double check that here, right? So how about this? I can prove to you that this is where stuff is going to go awry if I start to mess with the code here. I'm trying to think, how can I prove that this is... Let me say, if section has at least one live lesson equals true and false. True and false doesn't matter. True and false is false. False and false is false. So when I say and false, what I'm saying is essentially don't ever render this div. So if I go back and refresh and get rid of my breakpoint or play it through my breakpoint, play it through the next breakpoint. Boom. Everything disappears from this left-hand menu. Right? In other words, it's not rendering any sections. So as you can see, if I fiddle with that, stuff is going to happen, right? So now imagine you're a student, you see one lesson, and you're like, okay, now what? What do I do after I finish this lesson? There's nothing else you can do because you can't click on another lesson, right? So clearly that is where the code needs to be modified. So that's good. I now have, from a student view, from a student perception, from a student standpoint, you can call this a use case. The word for this is use case. The use case as a student is when they visit the student course.html page and the sidebar lessons div is being rendered. We should introduce logic here to check a property that determines whether or not we should render this particular section. Again, if the logic is on a section level. I might want the logic on a lesson level. That'll be further down in our investigating. So let me put a little to-do in here, and we'll say this is likely where the evergreen code should display, or should choose whether or not to display a given section/lesson, right? Now, I don't know if to-do works in here. To-do doesn't work in a HTML perspective, which is kind of annoying, but anyway. So there we go. From a student perspective, those are the two places that we care about. So now, what's the next step? The next step is, from a teacher perspective, how do we set this up? What's the data involved here? So I believe, again, like I said, when a student places an order for something, in other words, when they purchase a course I believe that's the best starting point to determine this functionality, right? And I believe orders already have, created dates. So an order already has a created date. An order will get created when a student has purchased, right? So we already have that built in. We already know when an order was created. So all the logic that we're talking about here in terms of showing or hiding future lessons can be based on the order's created date. Cool. That's a piece of data in our database that already exists. We don't have to mess with it. We have the date. Excellent. Let's move forward. So the example that we're talking about in this case, let's say we have a, we have a course with 5 sections. Each section contains, 6 lessons. Doesn't matter how many lessons, but each section contains 6 lessons. We want to unlock a new section every single week, based on start date, right? So the first week, therefore, when a student first purchases this course, they will have access to the first section immediately, but sections 2 through 5 are locked. 7 days later, section 1 and 2 are now unlocked, but sections 3 through 5 are still locked, etc. So that's the if I were to put it in plain English and write it out on the screen, that's what we're going for. That's this new functionality. Now I've worded this such that it is based on a section. So let's look at the section. Well, first let's think. There could be a benefit. There could definitely be a benefit to having more granular functionality here. In other words, don't base unlocking on an entire section, but rather on maybe more granularly base it on lessons, not sections. Let's say a teacher was lazy and has a 40 hours worth of content across 175 lessons, all within one section. There's just one section, it's called Here's the Course, and you have 100 plus lessons. For that instructor, I would sort of be penalizing them unintentionally for designing their course this way inside of my platform, right? If I make this functionality based on sections, I'm saying, hey, because you only have one section, you can't really use this functionality. That doesn't help. So really, I should change this. Hopefully you understand sort of the logic here that I'm going through in my head. I'm thinking about the real world and how, we saw already, right? We just happened to see one of my courses, the Mars rover course. I slapped it together in terms of the layout quickly. I spent a lot of time recording the lessons and meticulously designing the course and recording it. But when I created it inside of Professo, I slapped it all inside of one section called Mars rover API course. So all the lessons are inside of one section, which means that for this course, I wouldn't be able to do this to have this functionality. So that's not great, right? I maybe do want to be able to apply this at a lesson level instead of a section level. So we have a course of 5 sections. Each section contains 6 lessons. We want to unlock a new section worth of lessons every single week based on start date, e.g. order created date. Therefore, when a student first purchases this course, they will have access to the first section's worth of lessons immediately, but sections 2 and 5 worth of lessons are locked. 7 days later, section 1 and 2 are now unlocked. And you get the idea, right? So you could sort of change the wording to say sections worth of lessons, but it is more tailored to be a lesson level. Okay. So, oh my God, I just realized I've been completely ignoring my son who's sleeping. I have the baby monitor here, and thankfully he's actually asleep. So, I'm supposed to be paying attention. Bad dad. All right. Next, we need to think about, okay, create a date. Cool. So everything should be based on the created date. I think that's fine. That logic is sound. But when we go into the order has an offer has a course has a section. So we were thinking about putting this data, or this potential data, extra piece of data inside of the section. But now maybe I want it to be at the lesson level. I'm just looking at what a section has. A section doesn't really have anything fancy, but maybe we want to put this on the lesson level. So if we look at the lesson level, I think I have, yes, is published and release date. Is published and release date. So we already have something somewhat built in to this class. But, okay, here's the problem. Okay, right. The release date data for a particular lesson is not dynamic. In other words, you can set a release date for a lesson to be some date in the future, but that's it. It has to be, it's hard-coded. It's one specific date. So this is good for, like, you know, a movie release, or well, not a movie release, but a course release. If you're launching a course and you want it to go live on a specific day and time, you could do that. But this is all, it's static. It's not dynamic. It's not evergreen. It's like launch based. You're launching on an explicit date and time. Helpful, but not what I want. I want evergreen. I want the ability to release this on a dynamic basis based on a start date. So, what parts do I need in place here to make this work? I think it goes sort of in line with what these do, which is it looks at the release date plus the is published, but rather not the release date. It looks at whether or not it is published, whether or not this lesson is published. The is published flag should take priority, because as a teacher, I'll show you what I'm talking about. As a teacher, let me go back home and go into my teachers section. Let me say for let's go to the Mars Rover course. Mars Rover. This is the teacher view. So if I go into the outline of the course, this is the section name, Mars Rover API course, if you remember, right? These are all the lessons. And the lessons have a published button. So I can click unpublished or published, and it will, that's the master switch as to whether or not we should show a lesson. I'll show you. So if I go to My Courses again on a different tab and load up Mars Rover API Workshop course, and then I go into look at a specific lesson, like let's say Intro to Full Stack Web Development or whatever. I can go Intro to Full Stack. If I make it unpublished and then come back here and refresh, this Intro to Full Stack Java Development is now gone. Okay, it's no longer published. So that's the master switch. We always want that to function the way it functions now, which is if it's not published, regardless of anything else, it will not show up. If it is published, then we go further down and look at further functionality and further data that we need to investigate. Which in this case, it's release date. So if it is published and it has a release date in the future, then that means it's kind of scheduled to be released, but it's not actually going to be live, right? If it's published, but the release date is next week, cool, it's going to be live, but it's not going to be viewable yet. It's going to be viewable on that date and time. However, we want this new functionality. So we'll need to add, what would this be? Add a, what's the word? It's not a date. It's kind of like, it's the number of days in the future based on the start date. So it's an offset. It's like add an offset number of days for evergreen functionality. Right? That's kind of what we're talking about here. We want to have offset from a number of days since the created date. Okay? And then the next thing is, well, how do we want to, do we want to set a time as well? And consider whether we want to have a time as well. So in other words, is this functionality whereby we dynamically unlock lessons in the future based on a start date? So if I order the course today, 7 days from now, I should then get introduced to a new set of lessons. Do I also want to have the granularity to specify a time as well? In other words, not just a number of days since the start date, but also at a time of day that these get released. Or should just be defaulted to midnight or something. I imagine if I was a teacher and I told my students that next week at 8 a.m. you'll get access to the next set of lessons. That's probably more along the lines of what a teacher would say to their students. Because students would say, hey, I'm done this module. When can I get access to the next module? If the teacher just said next week on Monday, the student would say, okay, great, but what time, right? They might want to know what time, because they might know that they have to work between this hour and that hour, and they'll have this a window available before 8 a.m. They're going to want to know what time. So yes, we're going to have to put in time. So we'll have to add an offset number of days. And also a time of day that goes along with number of days offset. I'm trying to think of what is the best way to do this. So here's what's going through my head. I could just do it like this. I could just say private integer number of evergreen offset days, and have a private, local time, evergreen offset time. Something like that. Right? That's probably what I would do. The other option is you could add an entire Java object. So I could create a brand new Java object. So option 2 is I say private, evergreen release. Evergreen release is the object. And I could create this object and say, hey, create class evergreen release. And within an evergreen release class, I would have these properties. The reason why I think I'm a little bit skittish for doing it this way is then I would have to introduce yet another database table, and there would be yet another another relationship involved, potentially a one-to-one relationship. And the lesson, there's already so many relationships here. Order to offers, offer to courses, courses to section, section to lessons, lesson being made up of video, text, and quiz. I don't want to also introduce the concept of lesson to then evergreen release, right? It's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot. because we already have other things here as well. We have attachments and user lesson progress. It's just it's kind of getting, it's a little messy. So the downside of doing it this way is you have to have a whole nother database table. The upside to doing it this way is that it's more normalized, meaning the data is more, you have less nulls stored in your database, because not every single course is going to have or make use of the concept of evergreen functionality, right? And if we're creating columns for a lesson on the lesson table, if we're creating 2 columns, extra columns, and the majority of courses with lessons are going to not make use of this, then that's an awful waste of space too. That's the downside of doing it that way. So now when I say that out loud, I'm realizing this is at the lesson level, which there are lots of lessons, and probably the majority of courses which can have many, many, many lessons, the majority of courses probably won't be making use of this evergreen functionality. So now I think I'm changing the tune that I'm singing. And I think I'm going to have to do it this way, because I do it here anyways. Shoot. So I think I'm going to have to create an evergreen release. Which is within it going to have this kind of stuff. Oy vey. Probably. How do I refer to this? Like this? Oh no, I would do this. There we go. Try to figure out how to visually tell myself how this is going to work. Yes. There we go. So an evergreen release will have these properties within it. I just don't want to create an evergreen release object right now, so that's why I'm just typing it out here. So I think that's probably the way it's going to work on the teacher side of things, is we're going to have to create a whole new object, which is going to represent a whole new database table, which is probably going to be a one-to-one relationship between a lesson and this evergreen release, because there's really only, I don't know why you'd have multiple evergreen release schedules for the same lesson. That's just getting too complicated. So it'll be a one-to-one relationship. And yeah, that'll be in terms of the data side of things. We will be storing it like that. Okay. So we've got the from a design perspective now, in terms of the code, we've talked about the student side of things and how the student will be affected. We've now talked about the teacher side of things and how we will store data. So lessons will contain this evergreen release data, which then on the student side, when we're iterating through a course, the lessons within a course, somewhere in here we're iterating through lessons, right? So we have a section, boom, and then here, where to go? Here we're doing a th each through each of the lessons within a section, right? Then we should probably have an if statement check here to say, if the lesson is live, or not lesson, is live. Yes, is the lesson live or not? I think we do that. So we must check somewhere to see if a lesson is live. Yeah, so there's an if statement here to see if the lesson is live. So maybe we should also have like a and lesson dot, is, I don't know, not unlocked, is viewable, it's live, and it's, well, actually, hold on. I think there's a lot of logic that goes into this. Now that I think about it, oops. I think there's logic that goes into this is live check. So let's actually investigate that. How is a lesson marked as live? Because as you can see, there is no live property here, right? There is published, created date, created by, last modified, blah, 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 lesson number, title, blah, blah, blah. So there is no, in all this, in all these properties, there's no property that's called isLive. So what's going on? Let's see if there's a get or isLive. Is there a get live? There's get is published, get is live. Here we go. So this is called a transient. Cool, I didn't realize I had this in my application. Let me talk to you guys about transient and teach you something new potentially. So by default, when you are looking at a Java entity, if you're not familiar with what a Java entity is, let me take a quick moment to describe what an entity is. An entity is essentially a way to create a database table with Java code. Okay, that's a bit of a simplistic way to look at it, but that's essentially what this is. This is an entity means that the class is going to be a database table. So we have a lesson table. There's a table name, an actual database table called lesson. Okay, which is we do that by saying @entity. So that marks us as being something special. It means it's an actual table. And when we have an entity, and with an entity we have a getter, like a get title, that implies to our code base that there is a column within the database table called title. I'll say that again. We have a get method with an entity. We have a get method that implies that we have a column by that name. So lesson number is a column. Title is a column. Well, section is not a column because it's a relationship, and we mark it as such. We say this is a relationship, which could be a column. It could be a foreign key, but it depends on the type of relationship. Free lesson is going to be a column. Release date is going to be a column, etc., etc. Is published is going to be a column. But get is live, in other words, is live, will not be a column because we've marked it as transient. Transient means do not make this property persistent. In other words, don't make it a column. Specifies that the property or field is not persistent. It is used to annotate a property or field of an entity class mapped blah 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 blah. So it just means, hey, don't store this value in the database. This is kind of like a calculated field or a calculated column. That's the database equivalent. Only we're not actually leveraging the database in this case. We're actually just saying, hey, this is just Java code. Don't worry about the database. Even though we have this written inside of the context of an entity, which should represent a database table, don't make this a database table. So that's why on here, when I say, is the lesson live equal to true, this is actually calculating on the fly what that really means. So we can actually look at this. It says, hey, look at today's date. So get today's date and time and do this calculation. First of all, is it published? Remember, that was the master switch, on, off. So that's the first thing that we check. In order for a lesson to be live, it needs to be published first. If it is not published, in other words, if published equals false, it is, I believe it is anded with everything else, which means false and anything is going to be false, right? So if this returns false, then hey, this will go over here and return false. In other words, false. It is not live, and if it is not live, then it will not be displayed in the list of lessons. So this is exactly where our code should go. This is where we should do the calculation to determine if we have an evergreened lesson, and if so, should it be live or not. So this checks if it's published, and then it checks the release date to see if the release date is null, then sure, go ahead, make it published. Otherwise, if the release date is not null, then make sure that the release date is before today. In other words, it's been released already in the past. If it's been released in the past, then hey, we are live. As Bruce Buffer? Yes, Bruce Buffer says. If you're a UFC fan, you know who Bruce Buffer is and why that is semi-funny. So this is then where we would need to modify this and have some sort of an and or an or condition or something to say, you know, like I said, check and do the calculation to see if this lesson should be marked as live. And then, hey, then we don't even need to do anything to the front end. Okay, so I say this is likely where the evergreen code should go, but there you go. It's already built in. We already have a check to see if the lesson is live right here. So if the lesson is not live, if we change on the back end, it won't display on the front end. So I don't believe we need to even mess with this code. I believe I had the foresight, the forethought, if that's the right word, to plan 5 years into the future and know that my 5 year from now future self would appreciate the fact that I put that flag in there. So I don't think we need to modify anything in here, and I will tip my hat as being a coding genius. That is sarcasm. Cool. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to do the calculation here, and that then we need to be able to refer back to the order date. That's going to be the curveball here, because all of this functionality is based on the order date, as well as the potential, these new things, which is going to be the number of evergreen offset days and the evergreen offset time. So this stuff is going to be immediately available to us. We're going to be able to get access to this. It won't be a problem. But getting access to the order created date, let's just have a look at what that'll look like. We're going to have to say this, in other words, this lesson dot get, we're going to have to go up. What is up from a lesson? This is a lesson. We go up to the section. So we just say get section. What is up from a section? Well, it's a course. Dot get course. What is up from a course? The offer. Dot get offer. Here's where we run into a problem. This is not singular anymore. This is plural. Get offers. Okay, so this is going to be a problem. Oh, okay. Because it depends. So, yeah. Okay, let me think. So we are looking at the lesson code right now. Lesson is the entity that we are investigating, and we are within the lesson. We are looking at get is live. So what that means, oh shoot, my son's gonna be waking up soon. Let me wrap this up. What that means is a lesson on its own doesn't have the context of a user that has purchased that lesson. More specific, more generically, the user that has purchased the course, and even more generically, the user that's purchased the offer. So a lesson is not going to know anything about a user. So we need to think about that. That is going to be a problem. Essentially, when I say get is live, we need to have the ability to pass in essentially the order date or something. So this smells like a service, is what this smells like to me. Because a lesson doesn't have any context of a user. It really doesn't. And I don't know how to, like, my first instinct was to say, oh, let's pass a user into here, right? We can say, pass a user in. But really what we're talking about is, we're talking about a service. We're talking about some sort of a user service or a lesson service where we get this information together. Yeah, that's going to be a lot more tricky, which means we might have to change the front end. Yeah, okay. That's just the way it goes, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I had this beautiful, elegant solution that was going to be fairly easy to implement, but at the last minute, because I say last minute because my son's waking up, we hit our stumbling block. And I said that. I had this in the description of this live. I created the description before I started this live stream, and in the description I said the inevitable problems that I'm going to run into with the design. So here's that inevitable problem that I ran into. So yeah, I'm going to have to think about how to design that in such a way that I can figure out if a lesson, not only if the lesson is live, in other words, it's published and well, I don't care about a release date if it's an evergreen functionality, but I'm going to have to look at whether or not it's published along with this new stuff that we're adding, the evergreen release object, which is going to have the number of evergreen offset days based off of the order date. So I think what I'll just have to do is go back here. Let me reinstitute my to-do statement, and let me take back the bow that I took for being a genius programmer about thinking 5 years into the future. Because in this aspect of this view, if you will, we do have a concept of whether or not what user is being used to look at this lesson. At this point, we know the user. Okay, so I'm sure somewhere here we have a user stored, not free user. Well, we have users answers. Somewhere in here, there's got to be a reference to user, and if there's not, which doesn't look like there is, we can easily add one. We can easily add the user information here. So in other words, we can add the order date, right? The problem is that the order date, if we add the order date to the view, I don't like to do calculations and stuff in the view. Like, I don't want to be comparing dates in the view. I want to leave the logic, the comparisons, and the whatever to the Java side of things. So this means that, you know, somewhere on the Java side, before I'm looking at the actual lesson itself, somewhere in the controller, which we'll then call a service, I think it was a student course controller. Yes. So right here, we were looking at code inside of the controller. There's code to populate the model for the lesson. So in here, we have access to the order. So right here, we know what the order date is, right? So we can do the calculation on the order date. And I think we even have the current lesson, right? Lesson ID, which is the actual current lesson. Or somewhere we have, yeah, current lesson. So actually, in here, likely, this is where we can add but that's only for the current lesson that we're looking at, and we need to think about more than just the current lesson that we're looking at. It's helpful, don't get me wrong. It's helpful to be able to do that check here. Probably this is where we need to do the security check, but whatever. We need to think about all the lessons on the side. Right, and when we think about all the lessons on the side, when I say side, I mean here. Here, inside of this gray area on the side. We need to inject a property to say whether or not this should be displayed based on the fact that if we're dealing with evergreen functionality, right? And I'm tempted to modify that here. I'm tempted to take the course, because course is what we iterate through, right? We take the course and we iterate through it in the view over here. Where? Course.sections, right? So we take that course that we put on the view and iterate through the sections, which then we iterate through the lessons of the section. So I think, inside of here, yes, this is where this is where we can modify the course object, sections, lessons, to, tweak the is live property based on the evergreen, logic or whatever. It's a bad way to frame it, but essentially this is where I need to do some work to say, hey, let me tweak the is live property, because this is where we will require, because this is where we will need to know the context of the order's start date, right? Or created date. Which is entirely possible because right here, this is where we have the offer, which has the order, right? So the order we're iterating through the order and getting the offer and getting the courses inside of it and then putting that out here. So, yeah. That's where we need to modify the course. Cool. I think that should work. For sure, there could still be a curveball here, and for sure I could still get messed up with more hiccups, but that is where I will leave things and attend to being a good father and make sure that my son is well cared for. Why is this not compiling? What did I do? Get is live? Why is this complaining? Oh, probably because I messed up the... get. There we go. I added this line, which is not a valid line of code. Let me delete that. And then that should resolve that problem. There's more? What did I do? Get is live. Why? What did I mess up? Get is live. That should be fine now. Let me clean and oops. Yeah, clean and build. I think because all I did here is added a comment, and then this functionality should still be good. Why is this still... What did I mess up? The type lesson does not define get is live lesson. Lesson get is live. Oh, user, right. Sorry. I passed in a user there, so that's why it was... my bad. Okay, cool. So at this point, we have a good... This is the brainstorm. Look, it took me an hour and a half. It took me an hour and a half to go through, and for a somewhat simple back-end and some front-end discussion for functionality, it took an hour and a half for me to go through this. Obviously, it'd be a little bit quicker if I wasn't having to live stream this and explain some things as I went along, but it takes a long time. There's a lot of thought and process that goes into thinking through a solution before you ever really do type out code. Yes, I typed out some stuff here on the screen, but it's not code. These are just comments, right? I don't count that as code. I don't think I wrote any code at all today, so that is fairly normal. Right? Being a programmer in the real world is not about just every day writing a bunch of code, right? A lot of it is investigating. A lot of it is digging through existing code that someone else wrote or that you wrote many, many decades ago. And then sort of dissecting it and poking holes in the logic and figuring out, how to best implement your solution, et cetera, et cetera. So whether or not that, some people probably already understand that and know that, but some people don't. So it's helpful to just call that out. User. Oh, I just looked at the comments now and I saw someone pointed out the compilation error for me. So thank you for catching that. I wish I had looked down sooner. But yeah, so this is very common. It's common to just think about things. For me personally, what I like to do is, if I don't have to look at the code, like now that I've looked at the code, what I'm actually going to do other than going up and tending to my son is I'm going to walk around my house. I walk around my house and I think, and I talk to myself out loud. It kind of looks like I'm a crazy person, but that's just the way I process problems. That's how I think about problems and think about solutions. So now all the code is in my head. I can sort of think of it conceptually in my head about where all the moving parts are. But also there's a whole aspect of this that I haven't talked about yet, and that is for the teacher's view. So remember up here, I've added data, right? This evergreen release concept, which is essentially just two things. It's an integer and a time. But as a teacher, I'm going to have to specify those things. I'm going to have to type in the number of evergreen offset days if I want to have evergreen functionality infused into my code, right? There's going to be a view whereby I will be able to type that in and populate a lesson with this stuff. I have to start thinking about that. I have to think about what that's going to look like from a UI perspective. I'm not a UI guy. I'm not a UI designer, so I don't make beautiful UIs. But I can do something that's functional, right? And something that works. I have already for other aspects of this professional platform. But yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that too. So I'm gonna walk around my house. I'm gonna think about that. What is the best, user experience I can think of? What's the least annoying thing? What are some? If I come up with a solution in my head, I have to think. Is that going to be annoying in the real world? If I had to do that myself and introduce evergreen functionality into an existing course, is it going to be repetitive to do that? Is there some shortcut way of applying broad stroke evergreen process to all the, like, maybe there's, on a section level for the UI, you can type in the evergreening number of offset days and time, and that automatically applies it to all the lessons. That would be a good time saver. So there's also these other concepts that you need to think about above and beyond just putting the data directly into a lesson. You need to think about what the experience is going to be like for a teacher and doing this. So anyway, that's what I would go, just like I'm doing now with you guys, that's what I'm going to be doing out loud as I walk through the house. So that's my process. Whatever your process is, I don't know. That's what I like to do. So cool. I will stop ranting. I'm going to go not wake myself, but get him out of bed. And maybe tomorrow I will resume this live stream with the next step, which is going to be implementing some of the code that I've written here and actually starting to test it out. All right. So thank you so much for joining me in this live session. You guys have, some of you have stuck around all the way to the end, so I congratulate you for an hour and a half. That's a long time to stick with me. Thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully if all goes well, I will be doing this again tomorrow around the same time, 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So I look forward to seeing you then. If not, then I'm sure you'll be able to see a replay of this. So take care of yourself. Happy learning, and bye for now.